It was supposed to be an ordinary suburban neighborhood in southern Florida. Palm trees swaying gently in the humid air, children's bicycles left out on front lawns, and the occasional bark of a restless dog echoing down quiet streets. But behind one particular house, in a two-story home, with faded yellow paint and shutters that hadn't been fixed in years, something unspeakable was about to unfold. Authorities later said they could smell the stench of fear long before they ever crossed the threshold. But no one, not the neighbors, not the family friends, not even the girls' teachers, could have imagined the horror hidden inside that house. Her name was Emily, just 14 years old. Bright, shy, the kind of girl who blended into the background of a classroom. But within her own home, Emily was trapped in a nightmare. Her stepfather, Richard Hale, was the kind of man who never quite fit into the community, always lurking, always watching. A man whose temper was legendary, whispered about in grocery store parking lots. People described his eyes as too calm, as though he was constantly calculating something the rest of the world could never understand. On the night of July 16th, the nightmare escalated into something beyond imagination. Emily's cries echoed through the walls, muffled but distinct. The neighbors thought it was just another family argument, something that would settle itself the way loud households often did. But this time, it didn't. When officers finally forced their way into the home days later, what they discovered made even the most seasoned investigators freeze in disbelief. The living room was trashed, furniture overturned, shards of glass embedded in the carpet. The air smelled of wet dog, rust, and something far more sinister. In the corner, chained to heavy iron hooks drilled into the floor, were 3 massive dogs, Rottweilers with wild, restless eyes. Their jaws still glistened with something officers prayed was only raw meat. But as one detective later admitted, I knew instantly it wasn't. The house itself was a labyrinth of horror. The basement door was locked with 3 separate padlocks. The attic was nailed shut from the outside, and somewhere between those suffocating walls, Emily had disappeared. Richard told police she had run away. His voice was flat, detached, his story rehearsed. But the timeline didn't make sense. Her phone, her school bag, even the small notebook she carried everywhere. It was all left behind. It was as if she had been erased from her own life. The more the investigators dug, the darker the story became. The dogs had been trained, not just trained to guard, but to obey Richard's every command. Neighbors remembered the sound of his whistle piercing the air at odd hours of the night. They remembered hearing the dogs growl, followed by chilling silence. No one ever questioned it. No one wanted to. The evidence was mounting, but still there was no body, no proof, just whispers. One detective later confessed that what kept him awake at night wasn't just the unanswered questions, but the strange feeling inside the house itself. He said the walls seemed to breathe. The silence was too heavy, and the dogs, those enormous animals, never broke their gaze. They stared at him as though they knew something he didn't. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the back hallway, they found Emily's bracelet. A simple silver chain, bent and broken, still smeared with something dark. Next to it, a torn scrap of her shirt. At that moment, investigators knew they weren't searching for a runaway anymore. They were unraveling something far more sinister. The bracelet was the first undeniable crack in Richard's story. A runaway doesn't leave behind her most cherished possession. Detectives tightened the circle, pressing harder, searching deeper. But Richard remained calm, eerily calm, almost amused by the chaos around him. One officer recalled how Richard sat in his recliner as investigators combed through the home. The dogs, chained just a few feet away, never barked, never lunged, never growled. They sat in eerie silence, their eyes locked on Richard as if awaiting their next command. The turning point came when the search team returned to the basement. The triple padlocks had already raised suspicion, but now they were convinced. With bolt cutters and crowbars, they forced their way in. The smell hit them first, a suffocating, rancid mix of decay and animal musk that sent several officers staggering backward. Inside, the basement wasn't just a storage space, it was a chamber. Chains bolted into the walls, scratch marks trailing across the cement floor, stains that no cleaning product could ever erase. And there, in the corner, a half-buried pile of bones. Not a full skeleton, no, something far worse. Partial remains gnawed down to jagged fragments. Investigators froze. Their worst suspicions had materialized in front of them. But it wasn't just bones. Mixed in with the fragments were pieces of fabric, strands of hair, and one shoe, Emily's shoe. The silence that followed was unbearable. Some officers turned away. Others clenched their fists in fury. But Richard smirked. He sat upstairs as if waiting for this exact moment. When confronted, his response chilled detectives to their core. He whispered, "I didn't bury her. I fed her." The words landed like ice water in the room. The officers stared at him in disbelief. One slammed a fist against the wall, unable to contain his anger. But Richard never broke eye contact. His voice was steady, almost proud. The investigation uncovered what no one wanted to believe. Richard had been using the family dogs in ways no human mind should conceive. They weren't just pets. They were weapons, tools of terror. He had conditioned them to obey, to silence, to consume. Forensic teams confirmed what detectives already knew in their hearts. The remains found in the basement belonged to Emily. The trial became a media circus. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Neighbors who once ignored the warning signs now trembled in front of cameras, admitting they'd heard things but never dared to intervene. The story spread like wildfire, not just because of its brutality, but because of its grotesque symbolism. A child betrayed by the very man who was supposed to protect her. The courtroom atmosphere was electric, heavy, suffocating. Survivors of violent crime sat in the gallery, clutching tissues, unable to look away. Every detail dragged the public deeper into a nightmare they couldn't wake from. And when Richard's confession tape was played for the jury, the room went still. His voice filled the speakers, low and methodical, describing how Emily had stopped screaming once the dogs had done their work. One juror fainted. Another requested to be excused. Richard was sentenced without hesitation. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. But for many, the sentence felt hollow. Justice, perhaps. Closure? Never. Because some nightmares don't end in a courtroom. They linger. They echo. They stain the air long after the story is over. Neighbors still avoid walking past that yellow house. The new owners claim they hear scratching in the basement at night. The dogs were euthanized, but locals swear they can still hear barking in the dead of night. An unnatural guttural sound that doesn't belong to this world. And for the investigators who lived through it, the memory is permanent. Some left the force. Others still dream of Richard's calm stare, his chilling words echoing endlessly. I didn't bury her, I fed her. That line has become a scar in Florida's darkest archives. And tonight, as you turn off the lights and settle into silence, remember, not every monster hides in shadows. Some sit quietly in living rooms, smiling at neighbors, waving to mailmen, waiting for the right moment to reveal the horror they've carried all along. Because the most terrifying evil often wears the face of family. If this story left you shaken, disturbed, or unable to look away, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling cases. These stories may be fictional, but the fear they awaken is very, very real.